We are back once again with another look at some of the worst teams in the NFL. It's our top 10 picks in the draft. Today, we are looking at the number 4 pick, which is the Carolina Panthers at the moment. They are another one of those teams at 3 and 10. It looked like a disaster from the season. You know, Bryce Young was out, Andy Dalton was in, then Bryce Young was back in. There was players being traded. People were saying they're locked for the number 1 pick again. And then Bryce Young's looked fairly decent. Now he's had a bit of a time on the bench, and I think they're happy to move forward with him. So it might change the conversation a little bit of what people might have thought. But the Carolina Panthers, Adam, how do you feel about them? How did they get to this point? Well, I think we know how they got to this point. I think he's called Tepper. How did they get to this point, and how do they move forward?
Yeah, it's been a tough one for them. They haven't really done anything since Ron Rivera and Cam Newton as the quarterback and head coach. It's been a bit of a tough one for them, and they got to the Super Bowl and couldn't quite get there, and then they've just sort of dropped off. Brought in Matt Rule, which it didn't really work. He came in from college. That was a bit of a disaster. And Frank Reich obviously was there as well, and he really struggled with Bryce Young being there for the first year. So this year we've had Dave Canales as the head coach for his first year after he came from the Bucs, and Bryce Young has really struggled. He really struggled at the beginning, and it was all kind of falling apart. And I think everyone felt like it wasn't going to happen for him. And then he got taken out. They brought in Andy Dalton for a few games, and that really seemed to help him just to sort of take all the pressure off. And I feel like at the moment, the Panthers are playing with very little pressure on them. And I think that's kind of helped Bryce Young out quite a lot. So I think it's a really difficult decision, because when I look at it, I think so Dan Morgan is the GM. He came in, he was the former assistant general manager. He's now the general manager. Came in in that position in 2024. Dave Canales has just done 1 year. I would be shocked if either of them go, I haven't got any candidates for them, because I just don't. I don't think they're going to change anything. There's no point. Although, as you say, their biggest problem is their owner, who likes to fiddle about and cause problems for the team. And so he needs to keep them both there. There's no point in changing it. The only real question with this team that we have is whether they keep Bryce Young as quarterback or not, because given the fact that they're currently pick number 4, it does feel that they're going to be in a position to potentially trade up or get the quarterback that they want. So it is very much a case of, do they want to stick with Bryce Young? Do they think that he has developed enough over these last few games and will be able to continue with Dave Canales to develop? Or do we think that they need to just get rid and start all over again? And that's it's funny, because obviously we're talking about head coach and general manager a lot in these shows for this, but it really is quarterback when it comes to the Panthers.
Yeah, I think they stick with him, and if it all, like, lots of people will tell you that this is not a strong quarterback class. We were talking earlier about whether it was Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders is the number 1. It's not a clear one. For me, there is a clear one, but not in everybody's eyes. And then outside of that, I think everybody is a punt. So you could half say that maybe the top 2 are a punt. There's no locks, really. There's no yes, this is definitely a franchise-changing quarterback. And I think Bryce Young showed enough. So I think you stick with him. And if it goes tits up, we're quite confident that there is a guy next year in the draft that's supposed to be generational talent at quarterback. So there's the potential that if they are bad again, they can go, it's all right, because we're going to get Arch Manning. So there's a lot of people saying the Giants should not go this year and be bad again and get him next year. But I think Dable will be gone if that happens. So yeah, I think they stick. And then if it goes bad next year is the year you maybe look at one. There's another guy that I really like in Iomayava as well, who, you know, if he kicks on with Tennessee, that could be another prospect that people get excited about. So there's guys to look at in the 2026 draft class rather than 25. So stick with him, I say.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree. I feel like he's looked good in these last few weeks, and he's looked more competent. He hasn't been amazing, but he's looked more competent. And I just wonder if maybe, I think these next few weeks at the end of this season is going to be really important for him, and we'll be able to continue. But maybe having that breakaway and then being able to come back and I think Canales being able to, you know, talk to him and go through things with him, maybe that has helped as well. And I just think that maybe he's going to be one of these guys that just needs a bit more time than what some of the others do.
Well, he's not a diva either. I think, you know, when you watch him, he's very respectful on the field. You see him picking players up. You see him praying for the other team when they're hurt. You see him on the sideline. Even now, he's got.
Well, when Fred was over in Germany, you saw him having a kebab one night. I mean, that's what, yeah.
You know, he's on the sideline learning from Dalton. He wants to absorb all the knowledge. So he's not, you know, he seems like a guy that you can root for, and he's not a diva. So I don't think he's going to cause you too many problems keeping him in the building. So yeah, it's definitely a sticking from it. And equally, I think when you talked about the coaching stuff, I think they drafted well as well. I think they the players that they've drafted have played well so far this season. So.
Yeah. I think you know, both the receivers, Jalen Coker and Xavier Legette, have been all right. Especially Legette, he's done okay. You know, they haven't. They've looked at. I think everything is just kind of very much relying on the quarterback and whether or not he's going to be capable. Obviously, the whole Jonathan Brooks thing has just been a bit unlucky more than anything else, that he's gone down injured again.
Mm-hmm.
But you know, there is that issue. Well, I think they're in a. I think they're an organisation where it's just going to take a while, and I think that maybe Bryce Young is going to take a bit longer than what everyone first thought.
Yeah, so we like the wide receivers. They did well there. Tick. I like JT Sanders as well. I think he's been playing really well as well. He took a bit of a knock, I know, doing a somersault over a player, but he's looked good at tight end. And as you said, they've re-signed Chuba Hubbard, who's been fantastic for them over last season and this season. They've re-signed him to a new deal. Hopefully Jonathan Brooks comes back. So do we, you know, they got... They've dipped into the O-line in previous drafts, and they've got their left tackle. Do we think it's more defense that they need to be looking at in terms of free agency and the draft, or what? How do you see this roster? Because it used to be a roster that was really, really good and really young on defense, and not many of those players, bar JC Horn, is left there. So.
Yeah, they've lost a lot on the defense, haven't they? When it comes to the O-line, the only thing I would say is Brady Christensen is a free agent, and also I believe Austin Corbett is also a free agent. So you've got a couple of guys that are free agents on the O-line, but it's I kind of agree with you when it comes to the defense. Obviously, Brian Burns has not been replaced. You know, that's someone who you definitely need to have a look at. I think Edge has kind of struggled because of that, so I think they need to have a look there. I know you say about the and actually corner as well. Just quickly, I mean, like you say, JC Horn has been okay. Mike Jackson hasn't been awful. Caleb Farley's been a bit of a disappointment. So I do think maybe corner is somewhere that you might want to have a look at. And also, I do think that I know what you're saying about wide receiver. I do like Xavier Legette. I think he's good. I think Coker actually could potentially do something. Adam Thielen's getting a bit older now, though, so I do wonder if they are going to want to go out and get themselves. a main guy. I think that kind of similar to the Patriots one that we did. It feels like they're missing that real sort of like stud wide receiver number one. And I know that they're very difficult to come by, but they are going to be in a position in the draft to go out and get one. So it's like if they wanted to, they could. But yeah, I think edge is probably if we're going to stick with Bryce Young, which is fine, then I think edge is probably their biggest need.
Yeah, do you think free agency? You've already mentioned it previously on some of our other teams. Edge, there's loads of them in there. I think that whole D line needs players, all of it across the board.
Yes, that's true. Now, the only issue that we've got with the Panthers is that they've only got 16 million in cap space. So there's not a lot that you can really go out and do here. You can't go out and get like the best guys out there. But if you wanted to go for an edge rusher, which makes sense, Zach Bourne is a guy who's down there. He's down at 3.5 million that you could look at. I would have thought he probably has got himself a bigger contract than that now, but you could go for someone like him. Let's have a look. Who else is there? There's, someone like Dwayne Smoot, who's been playing for the Bills, who's not looked too bad. He's cheap at 2.5 million. I think you're looking at them sort of guys. One guy who I know it's defensive end rather than edge rusher. The guy who I think has been great this year and is down really cheap down that list at 1.7 million is Poona Ford of the Chargers. I mean, I think he's had a great season. So someone like him would be ideal. Obviously he's 29. Azeez Ojulari, I would have thought that the Giants would bring him back.
Yeah, I would have thought we'd bring him back. He's been fantastic.
Yeah, I would have thought so. But then
injured,
I have to say, I would have thought they would have brought him back already. I'm surprised that they didn't. But he's someone who's down there as well who can. So that they're kind of like that's the sort of guy who is a little bit cheaper. I think that's where they're going to have to look for the like defensive end and edge rushers there. Other than that, it's going to be going for the guys in the draft. I think when it comes to that, and I don't really feel like I said, I think the problem is they just don't really have the money to go out and really go on a spending spree. So it's going to be difficult for them. I do think corner they could do with someone, but when you've got such little money, it's really difficult. And there's just, I mean, you could have someone like Emmanuel Mosley, Eric Stokes. They're all about 2-3 million. But Asante Samuel Jr., 1.8. You could have someone like him, I suppose. He's been okay. But I think most of the stuff for the Panthers, it's going to take a few years to redo this roster. And I think that most of it's going to be through the draft.
Well, it's not really going to be in the draft because they haven't got many picks, have they? So
well, they've got I mean, they haven't got loads, but they've got a few that they can use.
Should we take a look?
Yes.
Right. Panthers, 3 rounds. Go. They haven't got a second round pick, have they? That'll be Chicago's pick again, won't it? So, that's really tough on them. It's going to be really, really hard. Look, 450 and 72 they're going to have. It says again, like we're not doing trades, but
again, they're a team that would make sense to move back if
I think 100% they move back. We're saying that they need edge, they need D-line, they need corner, and 4 is not where you need to be picking them. You'll get them further down. So they 100% will need to trade out of this pick and trade down to. They only need to go down to maybe that sort of 7-8 pick.
My only real concern for the Panthers is I don't actually think they're going to be picking it. I think they may potentially go out and get themselves another win in the rest of the season and end up a little bit lower down, and that's obviously going to make it harder to do that. But yeah, I think the trading back makes sense.
Well, if they are not up here and they're further down, then they're just going to get the player that I think they should be taking. I do think 4 this is too high. But it's definitely what they need, and it is. Abdul Carter. I think you can't pass up on what he's done at Penn State. Penn State's defense has been fantastic. He's been fantastic. I did. How far down? Let's just look at my edge rushers, just see where they've got them graded. I did have James Pierce Jr. as one of my top prospects in the draft, but I just think Abdul Carter's been fantastic this year. I also had both Ohio State's JT Tuimoloau and Jack Sawyer highly rated. I think they're late first rounds, not mid. I think Abdul Carter for me is the guy. So I think they don't need to take him at 4. They'll take him later, whether they trade down or whether they are later in the draft anyway.
Yeah, makes sense. Like say, it probably will be a little bit later, but that does make a lot of sense to go for that. And it takes out a really important need at edge rusher that they, like I say, haven't really replaced since getting rid of Brian Burns. So it's definitely somewhere they need to be looking.
All right, picks coming up. What can they double dip on that D line? They could double dip at edge rusher. There's still plenty of edge rushers for them at 50. I'm sure we did one earlier and there wasn't. Adam, where do you think that their next? You said wide receiver. Maybe this could be the pick that they dabble into that and go for someone else. We've already mentioned that this part of the draft is where you can still get value at wide receiver. I think there's 4 names on there alike. And I think after that, Matthew Golden is very good.
Mm-hmm.
You're taking a punt on anyone else. I do think these guys are where you need to be looking. I think with the fact that they've got Xavier Legette, who's a big guy, they could probably go for a Kyron Lacey, who's a get the ball in his hands and let him do the rest of the work job. Do you think that's kind of the guy they might be looking at to go? Or
well, like you say, Legette's sort of like a big wide receiver on the outside, isn't he?
And then Metcalf, isn't he?
Yeah. And then you've got Jalen Coker, who is speed. So it kind of feels like, obviously you've got Adam Thielen, who's sort of like going across the middle and being more of the slot guy. But it does, as I say, it does kind of feel like Thielen's only going to go on for so long.
I think Kyron Lacey might be the one for them specifically.
Because also it means he can have a year, can't he, behind Thielen as well, that can help him out, and that, so that kind of does make sense that you're going down that route. So that would make the most sense to me.
Just trying to see what best available for them is at this point. It might be TJ Sanders. So we did say they need to double dip into that D line. So they've had a phenomenal year there. Do you think there's any chance whatsoever that they get a quarterback just in case it doesn't work this season and see if one of those guys, a Jackson Dart, a Will Howard, maybe a Cade Klubnik if he pulls up. I'm not sure. I think the guy, but I think
if you're going to do that, I think it's going to be someone a lot later than the third round. I don't think you'd look at it now. I think corner could be, we did say like JC Horn, we liked him, but apart from that, I don't know if there's anyone that's any good there.
Lovely. If this guy is still available at 72, I'll be shocked. Denzel Burke, I think, I'm not sure how he's still on there. Let's just lock him in already. That's a no-brainer at 72 for me. Am I really that biased towards the Ohio State players?
Yeah, yes, you are.
Or are they actually that good?
But it's one of them where it's like as we said, JC Horn's there, but it feels like they could do some extra depth, a little bit more there. So, that would help them out. And when you look at that, they've got themselves 3 good guys there, and they've taken out a lot of the needs that they have, the wide receiver, the corner and the edge. So that's really good. Obviously with free agency, we've gone and got ourselves a couple of guys that can help. There are some corners out there that are pretty cheap. Someone like Asante Samuel Jr. would be really cheap that they could bring in. There are some edge rushers as well that can help with that. And, if the whole plan is that you're going to stay with Bryce Young, which is what we've done, then everything else kind of needs to stay as it is. And I think that they just need to develop everything. And unfortunately for Panthers fans, I think they're just going to have to understand that it's going to take a little while to get there and get to the point that they need to get to in order to be able to become a success again.
Yeah, do you think how many more years of struggle do you think there'd be? I know we've talked about how they can get by and bring in more youngsters and build for the future, but how many years do you think it will be until we see these players develop and they are competitive again? What's your thoughts?
I mean, I suppose you've got to remember that if you're going to have Leggett and Coker, and you just brought in another wide receiver as well, they're all very young, and that's going to take a little while for them to be able to do anything. You've got Bryce Young, who just hasn't developed in the way that I think everyone hoped that he would have. So I think you're going to be looking at a year or two before you can really think of yourself as being able to compete. Fact is, if you're taking away players like Brian Burns, then you're only going one way, and it's not the right way. So I think it's really difficult for them to be able to sort of look at themselves as though they're going to be like winning the division in like a year's time. I think it's just going to take a while for them to be able to do anything